Coming up on Smart Tech Today, Matthew Casanelli and I cast that news aside and answer your questions and listen to your feedback. We've got tips from the listeners for us. Matthew and I make a few discoveries along the way for fun things to try out, and we answer a bunch of questions that I think will be helpful to anybody who tunes in who has smart tech in their homes and is kind of wanting to learn new ways of using it, but also how to get the stuff they have to work properly. So many questions to answer, and of course, our picks of the week on this episode of Smart Tech Today. Hey folks, it would be fantastic if you haven't yet to head to twit.tv/survey21 to fill out the Twit audience survey. The door is closing lickety-split super fast very soon. And so if you haven't gotten in your answers and you want to be heard, now is the time to do so. It helps us here at Twit, helps us understand who our audience is out there, and helps us make sure that our shows and the content that we have match with the audience that's out there listening and watching. So that would be awesome. twit.tv/survey21 if you can head there for us. Thanks so much.
Podcasts you love
from people you trust.
This is Twit.
This episode of Smart Tech Today is brought to you by Casper. You deserve a fresh start this year. Reset your rest with supremely comfortable mattresses, bedding, and more from Casper. Go to casper.com/STT and use code STT for $100 off select mattresses. Hello and welcome to Smart Tech Today, where we explain the exciting, the dynamic, and the sometimes confusing subject that is the Internet of Things. I am one of your hosts, Mikah Sargent.
And I am your co-host, Matthew Casanelli. And this is a feedback show. Bwah, bwah, bwah. I'm excited.
Feedback. That's the feedback horn.
We've got some awesome questions from people.
Before we get there, I want to do a quick little mention, folks. If you have not yet, it would mean the world to us if you headed over to specifically Apple Podcasts, because that's one place where where there are places to leave reviews. I honestly can't speak to some of the other platforms. If there are, then it would be great if you did it there. But I know Apple Podcasts has a place to leave reviews and ratings. And if you've never left a review or rating before and you're not sure how, first of all, not your fault. It is a very confusing, kind of buried process. And so there's a great video, instagram.com/twit.tv, and find the post with my co-host on iOS Today, Rosemary Orchard, who explains very simply how to fill out a review in Apple Podcasts. So nice. It would mean the world to us if you reviewed this show, and it would be very helpful for you to do so as well. And if you don't have time to leave a review, a rating is just fine. However many stars you feel we deserve, that'd be great. So yeah, we appreciate that. Thank you.
Agreed. Thank you very much. Should we just jump right in?
Let's jump right in, Matthew. What kind of feedback do we have?
So I've grouped all of the different feedback today in some different categories. Got a couple tips, just feedback for us, Mikah and I, and stuff we've talked about. Some about gear, and then we'll talk about shortcuts and HomeKit. So just to start off on the very basic thing, Robert Hafer has a question or a comment basically saying that he installed the Ring Mailbox sensor and he doesn't have any of the sidewalk bridges and it still works fine at 50 feet, so he's saying it's a little bit more like Zigbee. So I thought that was a good comment because we have talked about sort of just the inherent opt-in creepiness of Amazon's sidewalk sensor system for people to be able to extend out to the sidewalk literally like that. And so his kind of comment is you might be able to use those products without actually using the sidewalk thing there. So I thought that was just worth mentioning for people who are maybe hesitant about the whole network, but still want the mailbox sensor as a useful tool.
Yeah, $29.99 on Amazon. Is that what that is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I assume. Or Ring's website through and via Amazon.
And then if you don't have a Ring bridge, which I didn't know was a thing, then you could get the mailbox sensor plus the bridge for $49.99.
Nice. And then he also has a secondary comment about Insteon has had a product a couple of years before for Hue. He's saying the remote control micro dimmer switch adapter. So we can have the links in here. I'm not exactly sure what this is in. Is this just talking about the feature of being able to have your wall switches into remote control dimmers?
We reported that Philips Hue was announcing a new product where instead of having to install, or the problem is people go to the wall switch, they turn it off, and then suddenly the Hue connected bulb that's in your actual light fixture doesn't have power anymore, and therefore you can't communicate with it.
That's right. And
so it seems that Insteon has something that works like this, but I'm curious how well it works in terms of maintaining power with the switch turned off. I mean, is that kind of what it's for? I was looking at the entry there as we were scrolling on it on the screen.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure. Some of these, especially since this is not, I think the big thing is it's not as consumer facing of a product. It's the actual adapter that I think that goes in the wall. And so it's not, that's one thing that Philips Hue is really good at, is taking something like this that already exists and packaging it so a consumer can figure it out a little bit easier. I think it's mostly just for the control. I'm not sure specifically about the being able to turn it on and off at the same time.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thank you to Robert for your help there.
And then this second one, I think, is a little bit more for you because you've got the TV controls. But Justin from the UK is talking about, no doubt you've heard this already, but just in case, the functionality you're missing for your HomeKit TV is actually in the control center remote. So it isn't particularly discoverable that volume control is in the physical device buttons in the control center remote, using the phone volume up and down on the side, he's saying. And then you'll have to go into the drop-down menu at the top and switch from your Apple TV to that TV. And then you'll also have the control center remote buttons that let you control the TV UI. So I have like a similar, it's basically talking about in the same way that the remote app can control the Apple television, not Apple television, that's confusing. The Apple TV, and if even via like HDMI CEC, I can do volume controls for my receiver. Sounds like in order to actually control the TV itself, you need to switch away from the Apple TV to the real TV, and then that's when you should get some more of those controls.
You need to switch away. So you
like
cut
if
out
you
that
have
briefly, so I'll just kind of repeat what he was saying. Essentially, instead of, because we can pop open, if I swipe down from the top right on a phone without a home button, and I choose the remote app, right now at the top of my screen, it's hard to see, but I don't want to do that because I don't want to mess up my focus. It says Toco, which is the name of the Apple TV that I have. And with that, through HDMI CEC, I can use the volume controls on the side of my iPhone to actually control the volume of the Apple TV, because the Apple TV is connected to a HomePod that's set up for home theater. So essentially it turns up and down the volume of that HomePod. But if I just had it connected to my television, it does not support volume control over HDMI CEC. And so if I had, with my remote, Toco selected at the top, and I do volume up and volume down, it would not actually control the volume of the television. But what Justin is saying is that if I switch from Toco in my Apple TV remote to 43-inch TCL Roku TV, then I would be able to control the volume up and volume down. And this is actually the first time, Justin, that I've ever even known that this was here. So thank you for pointing this out. My controls say there's a back button, there's a play pause button, there's kind of a joystick sort of situation going on in the middle, and then there's a little eye for information, which I just hit and is probably bringing up information on the television downstairs right now. But what Justin is saying is now if I do those volume controls, it's going to turn up and down the volume on the television itself. That is very interesting, and I do appreciate that, Justin.
Yeah, and I assume there's a little more of the like inputs control and things like that there, but it's probably something you'll need to be in front of the TV for. But also his second half of the comment is about, as a HomeBridge TV plugin developer, this is one of the biggest frustrations with how Apple has implemented TVs in HomeKit, because those other TVs aren't visible in third-party HomeKit apps. So even though they should be able to do that, even if you're in Eve or the Home Plus thing, the Home app isn't actually integrating those. So it sounds like it's almost using like AirPlay instead of HomeKit, because it's not what AirPlay means is kind of been smushed into multiple things now, but it does sound like it's using, because it does make sense that I guess maybe is your TV specifically, it should be HomeKit supported if it's doing that. So that is odd. It should be exposed to there. That does sound like one of those things it's just newer, and so they haven't gotten around to those deeper levels of integration.
Yeah, and Apple has truly kind of glommed together two or three different sort of technologies here, because you've got your home theater controls, which are were not originally kind of part of the Home app, but then they added the HomePod to the Home app, and that's where you do updates for the HomePod. But then you added Apple TVs to the Home app, and there's really not much you can do with those via the Home app, but they just appear there. And then now my Roku TV also appears in the Home app, and the controls that are available there, including input and some other things, are not the same as what's available in the remote control panel thing. So I think it's more an issue of Apple originally creating this technology separately and then realizing, this all is technically Home, so we should just make it all available in the Home app unless you control things from the Home app. And unfortunately, they haven't kind of finished that process yet, I think.
Yeah, but that still is a good tip, just to clarify again that if you do have a TV that is connected, you probably have to switch in the remote app from your Apple TV remote into the TV control specifically. But thank you, Justin. And those are just the first two tips for us. Now we've got gear advice. And so I thought this one, you can help me answer, Mikah, too, because it's always a little different depending on who we are. But Corey is asking, I'm currently using a Wink hub and want to switch to all local control. I will say, I'm pretty sure Wink is still down. So, oh my gosh,
Don't
that's not good. So he was saying, do you recommend Home Assistant or Habitat? Which I'm not super familiar with Habitat, and I'm only vaguely familiar with Home Assistant, just not having set it up myself. But he says, I currently have Z-Wave door lock and smart blinds and Wi-Fi switches, but I'm going to switch all my lights to Z-Wave or Zigbee. So Habitat is, I think, it is cool that I wish we had talked about these more and experimented a little bit, but both Habitat and Home Assistant are local home control devices in the same way that HomeBridge sort of operates. You will get a little hub and then it all does the automations locally. I will say I at least am familiar with Home Assistant because I've followed through other podcasts. One of the guys, Robbie, is a core contributor to it. And so at least one of the things that's always helpful with some fledgling tools is if you don't know anybody, you don't know where to get started. And so at least with Home Assistant, maybe some people in that community can help a little bit too more directly. Have you had experience with Habitat?
No, and I'm just going to say don't. Because Wink is an example of this. Some random company sprouts up and wants to be the, it's doing it again. wants to be the assistant for your home control, and then the company goes out of business for some reason, and then you're dealing with the same thing. The difference between, Habitat, I go to the page and there's a buy now button super big at the top. With Home Assistant, it is an open source creation that is constantly being updated by multiple developers. It is sort of a community project. And if there's one thing we could say about kind of open source projects, it's that they tend to struggle to die. And I say that in a good way. It's hard for them to die. And the code is out there. The code is available. It's it's something that you can use in its current iteration. And even if it doesn't get updated later, it's still available to use in its current, because it's all local stuff that you're doing, that you're controlling. And then you're plugging in with APIs with these big companies. So I don't recommend buying hardware from some third-party company I've never heard of or barely heard of when you can go for something like Home Assistant, where you kind of turn your computer into the local hub and your local, network into the hub and do it that way. I think that that's your better bet if you're not going to go for the larger systems, which is, getting a Google or a Nest device or an Amazon Echo or a HomePod / Apple TV, and kind of going all in on those systems. So Z-Wave, Zigbee, if that's where you want to be, Home Assistant or an Amazon Echo, the fourth generation has a built-in hub with it.
I do think it seems like he's more interested in the local control part, though, where it's not. I've seen that in a couple of these questions where it's like people don't want to go up to Amazon at all. And that's why they're leaning more towards these, like, why not just rent it at my house? But yeah, I agree.
Amazon is pivoting to doing local control of devices because of the fact that it's got hubs built into almost all of its new speakers now, smart speakers now. But if you're wanting to go completely local and you don't want to run the risk of eventually having a company go under and then not be able to use the product anymore, then Home Assistant is your best bet, I feel.
Open source. I agree.
Yep.
Awesome. Hopefully that helps you, Corey. And then this one doesn't have a name, but I'm going to give you the compliment here. Mikah, this person loves watching Leo and yourself on IS Today. I guess this came before Rosemary, too. So we're a little behind on this one, but really to smart home tech. I'm looking at purchasing a video doorbell and 2 outside cameras. They have 2 Nest Protects and a Nest thermostat. Should they stay in the Nest ecosystem and purchase the outdoor cameras and the Google Hello, or venture elsewhere? And then I wanted to get your very respected opinion on what you see that will last us a decent amount of time. Thank you so much, and for being a part of the Twit network. Thank you, Mikah.
Well, thank you, Anonymous. That's very sweet, very kind of you. So here's the deal. You say you have 2 Nest Protects and a Nest thermostat. That means you are squarely within the Nest ecosystem. And now that Nest is owned by a big company, in theory, it has it's a much safer purchase to make, especially now that Google has pivoted its sort of smart products into the Nest branding. I think before that happened, I would still be kind of about it. But given that it's pivoted into the Nest branding with the Nest Audio, you've got a pretty safe bet that Google's going to be doing this for a while. And I know that's hard to say given how much Google, quits on things. But because of that, because you've already got 3 Nest products, I think that it doesn't really make sense for you to kind of step out of it, because as we've said on the show before, there are benefits to kind of sticking with one system and using that system as your way to go, because you get better integrations that you might not get if you go kind of the mixed device route. And given that you're I would imagine in the Android ecosystem, or that you might be in the Android ecosystem, I can't recommend, HomeKit products. And given that the Nest thermostat and the Nest Protects don't work with HomeKit on the face of them, you can get a system that does that. Your least expensive and most reliable solution is going to be using Nest products. So if you come back and you tell me, anonymous, if you come back and you tell me that you are okay with losing some of the potential integrations, or that you are really trying to get outside of the Nest ecosystem, then I would have some different answers for you. But yeah, given how much you're kind of plugged in there, you're going to get a lot of benefit of sticking to it and letting those devices work together, because Google/Nest has set up a lot of integrations between these products that are quite nice in many cases, I have to say.
I totally agree too that I'm a lot more confident in them now that they have done something with Nest and moved forward with it, and it wasn't just kind of dying on the vine. I think I even saw on Twitter that they got rid of their Twitter accounts, and it's all just under the made for Google one instead of the individual Nest things. So that is just kind of like another sign of the consolidation thing in a way that makes me more confident about Nest as a thing, as opposed to before it was kind of like a weird, like, ugly duckling stepchild thing.
Right, exactly.
So yeah, cool. And then another question from Jason Perry. I live in a mixed device house. We use the SmartThings Hub for our automation and a number of Google Assistants for voice control throughout the house. Is there a benefit to getting a HomePod Mini to use as a gateway device for the people in the house that have Apple devices? I have no desire to use Siri as a voice assistant, but don't mind bringing it into the house to extend the house's functionality in either direction, user to house or house to user. And then thanks for the time. So this is an interesting question, and maybe you can help me process. I was not exactly sure about the part of integrating backwards towards the house from the HomePod, because it does sort of rely on the actual hardware beyond the hubs for what you're using. Because it sounds like if you're going for SmartThings Hub and Google Assistant stuff, just typically you bought that because it didn't have HomeKit support, and chances are it still doesn't. And so I'm not sure totally if the HomePod itself would help them control backwards. But again, if you just have like Hue lights or something, it totally could work. I can assume that some people previously would like fully buy into these systems like the SmartThing Hub because you weren't sure about the state of HomeKit, or like we were even saying Nest. But now I think those are a little bit more established, and it is worth getting devices that support across those things. I also just think the HomePod Mini is fairly cheap and good on its own. So I don't think people would be upset getting the HomePod Mini and being like, oh, this wasn't worth it. It's still an awesome product. So I think it would make sense. Do you have a different opinion?
This is kind of a tough one. I don't know, because I don't know what products you have. Like you've said, if I knew what products Jason had in their household, then I would maybe have a better idea of whether this purchase is going to be worth it. Because you do point out, it's not. You're not going to be disappointed making the purchase of the HomePod Mini, even for just being a smart speaker or a music device. But if you're buying it specifically for the purpose of kind of extending the functionality of your smart home, then you might end up being disappointed if the products that you're using are not well within the scope of what HomeKit supports. And then you also are going to have the process of needing to set those products up with HomeKit. So it might end up being a bit of a drag. This is a hard one, Jason. I suppose what I would say is write us back. Let us know what products you have, and that can help us better answer the question on if it makes sense to add a HomePod Mini to your house. And then, if that $99 purchase isn't too difficult for you, then by all means, get one. I just did a re-review of the HomePod Mini with MacBreak Weekly panelist Renee Ritchie, which you can check out over on YouTube, youtube.com/Renee Ritchie. And in it, I think we both kind of talked about how much we really enjoy the sound quality of the HomePod Mini, that despite the fact that it's so small, Apple chose clarity over ability to pump out like loud sound. So clarity over loudness, and it was the right choice for them to make, I feel, with that product. So yeah. Get back to us.
It could be a homebridge situation too. Like if you are that cross device and those, you want to continue using those things, and some of it could work with HomeKit, but maybe only a few don't, and you just want a HomePod Mini. Like I think it is going to be more common to see setups like this where people have previously not cared about Apple's ecosystem because those hardware devices weren't worth it, and now the HomePod Mini is kind of like that Trojan horse for Apple to break into homes like this. So it is, again, price I think is a good point too. Like buying a Homebridge or Hoobs thing for another $100 could slightly double the price, but again, if you want to make sure all your devices work, it could be worth it.
Let us take a quick break and take a nap, because I'm excited to tell you about our pals at Casper. Resolutions? You can do them in your sleep. Seriously, 2021 is your chance to rest harder and sleep smarter. And Casper has cool, supportive mattresses and super soft bedding to make it all possible. So this year, make your resolutions easy. Only Casper mattresses are made with 86 supportive gel pods to align your spine and eliminate aches and pains. It's the supportive comfort you need to wake up refreshed and ready to go all year long. You can get the Wave Hybrid. It's perfect for people who have aches and pains and want a mattress with maximum support and cooling. Or for the most plush mattress, you can check out the Nova Hybrid for a plush feel that doesn't sacrifice support. Or try the most popular. It's the original mattress. That's the one I have. The one for sleepers who want both support and cooling. Casper's best-selling original Casper pillow is also made with a unique pillow design that's soft on the outside and supportive on the inside for all-night comfort. It's a mattress. It's a pillow sandwich. It's a nice one kind of soft pillow on the top, one soft pillow on the bottom with a firmer pillow in between, and you zip the two soft pillows kind of over the top of that one in the middle. It's pretty brilliant. And I have my Casper pillows. I've had them for ages, still holding up all this time later. Really great. Casper makes everything you need, not just pillows, to refresh your whole bedroom this year. You can get the super soft percale sheets, their all-season down duvets, and the cozy, calming, weighted blanket. That's right, folks. Casper is in on the craze. They, too, have a weighted blanket. As always, Casper offers free shipping and free returns with no contact delivery. So make 2021 more comfortable. Reset your rest by going to casper.com/STT and use our code STT for $100 off select mattresses. That's code STT for $100 off select mattresses. Terms and conditions apply. See casper.com for more details. Thanks so much to Casper for sponsoring this week's episode of Smart Tech Today. What's next in the feedback?
All right. This is from Craig, who loves the show, by the way. I live in a large home and have to extend my network from my office to provide appropriate range and speed. So the setup is like this. Downstairs, there's one modem and one wireless router number one. And then upstairs, there's a second wireless router connected via Ethernet to that wireless router, which is an interesting... I didn't notice that detail, actually, the first time I went through this, but when my phone is connected to the first wireless router, the home app works. However, when it's connected to the second one, it's shown as no response. So how can you get it to work on both networks? And they do have different names. So I think, I was going to say, is that your immediate reaction? Is that put it on the same network? Because it doesn't work across those. I was also confused why it's the first router is wireless, and then he's wired from that to another one. It's like,
I think he means it's probably a wireless router that has ports on it for being wired too.
Okay, because I was going to say you would lose some of the speed in that first jump, and then it's hardwired on the second part. Yeah, I think the main thing is just that it doesn't. I'm not sure if there's a specific reason to have that second router be on a different network, but it does sound. I can't remember. Is it called bridge mode? Is what you stick it into for the second one? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's usually the tip.
Yeah.
And you didn't specify any hardware type or anything like that, but find the bridge mode and then transfer that over.
Yeah, because Craig, it's interesting. I have, so I was having this issue. Eero is a fantastic system. They've been a sponsor on the show before, but I would say that even if they weren't a sponsor, Eeros are fantastic and I've loved them. One of the things that I didn't, or that I struggled with, and they ended up adding a feature in the app that lets you do this. But one of the things that I struggled with initially is every once in a while, you'll come across a usually low quality product that needs to connect over 2.4 gigahertz. And it does so in such a, because there are some products that they do need to connect over 2.4 gigahertz, but they have no trouble ironing that out for themselves, figuring that out on a router that puts out both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. But you get some products and they don't have the code to figure it out on their own. And so they just completely won't work on a device that is putting out 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz networks at the same time. And so now there's a setting in Eero's app where you can basically disable the 5 gigahertz radios for a short period of time, long enough to connect, and then it will work. However, oftentimes what will happen then is that it will turn that 5 gigahertz network back on, and that low quality product will, at some point when it tries to reconnect to the Wi-Fi, try to connect to the 5 gigahertz and can't. And so then you are still with an issue. So what did I do? I took out my old Airport Extreme, which is Apple's old router that it used to make, and I plugged it into my main system via a network switch that I have, and I thought I was going to have to give it the same SSID in order for it to work how I needed it to, but no. I put it in bridge mode, and I gave it a different name, and I have the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz broadcasting on separate SSID names. So it's, Winterstein 2 and Winterstein 5 or something like that. And when that happens, I can connect those low quality devices to it, but they still show up just fine in my home app. They still are on the same network, and I can connect my phone to that network and it still works with my home setup. So I think two things that need to be ironed out here, Craig. One, definitely make sure that your router is in bridge mode, that it's not creating its own network that has IPs assigned separately from the main router, because not only is that an issue for you being able to have the home app working, but it can also cause some issues with your local Wi-Fi and Ethernet system. If two devices get assigned the same IP, then you've got all sorts of issues with your network. So there could be an issue there if you don't have it set up in bridge. And if you do have it set up in bridge and it's still not working, then it could just be that whatever the Apple router is doing is what's making that work for mine, and it could be different. So yeah, hit us back if you want to, Craig, to let us know if you definitely do have that second router in bridge mode and it's still not working for you. Because if that's the case, then there's more troubleshooting to be done, and we can reach out to some networking people who have a little bit more experience in this very particular area.
Awesome. Thanks. Cool. And then the last one for the gear advice thing is from Harry from upstate New York. He has a particular problem. He's trying to set up an NFC tag to automatically connect the person scanning the tag to the guest network Wi-Fi. And it sounds like it's it's like, this is exactly, it's very easy to set up on Android, and on iPhone, it's still basically non-existent or weird and obtuse. So he's saying he wants it can be done with QR codes, but an NFC solution is more ideal. And this is one of those things where I basically have the solution, but it doesn't work, which just sounds like exactly like HomeKit or smart home stuff half the time, where you can absolutely write QR. You can write Wi-Fi and SSID things into NFC tags almost pretty easily, but the weird part is triggering it on the iPhone. And for some reason, most of the apps just don't really do it. And I'm not sure why. It's one of those things where it's also like you're sitting there holding your phone, trying to tap it, and it's like just not working really. So there is a whole spec for making your Wi-Fi codes specifically. And then I even put a link into, there's a URL scheme for taking those Wi-Fi things and having your phone automatically open it. So the information is all there, but getting your phone to actually trigger the NFC tag is the thing that I always run into. And it's like, you can get an app that reads NFC tags and do that, but I'm almost positive that's not exactly what he's talking about. It's like he wants to just have a thing that they just tap and it works right away. So I've got links to the app. What is this one called? NFC Tools is a way to write to it too, but there's really not a great way to trigger this. And I was disappointed because in the control center on iPhone, there is now a new option that you can add in to scan codes. The code scanner is what it's called, but it doesn't actually have like an NFC reader at the same time. So I don't exactly have a solution here, but I feel like this is like one of those things that with a little software update, they could probably make this a lot more possible. So I'm going to keep looking into this and maybe even follow up directly if I can find something there. But it's a very desirable thing because it is like QR codes are still, at least in the US, just like not cool. It's like they're there and they were way more popular than before, but I think NFC, especially just being able to tap it, is like a much cooler experience. So hopefully we can get something like that soon.
Yeah,
thanks, Siri.
This.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's right there in front of you and you just can't get it to work. Like that's why it's like Apple has to build this in. Otherwise, it is like you could just get an app. But ironically, I thought of you could get an app clip which uses a QR code to get the NFC app. Just scan the stupid code the first time. Okay, and then now I've got a whole set of shortcuts ones. So I feel like we should just dive into these, starting first with one that just cuts so deeply into my soul. What is the best way to resolve shortcuts being out of sync between two Apple devices using the same iCloud account? I suggest you find a wall and smash your head against it because that's what I've been doing. Not literally, but also I think this is what does tend to happen. And so he's saying he has some subroutines that play sounds that uses a decoded text sequence. So this is for anyone who doesn't know, there's a way that shortcuts can use, it's called base64 encoding, to take images or files or sounds and encode them into basically extremely long text strings that then can be converted from the computer back into the actual file. And so this is just how computers store images and things like that. But people are stuffing audio files into their shortcuts by way of base64 encoding, and then it'll like reconvert that into a little sound effect quickly. I do think what happened on I also don't even know, but Federico Vitici of Mac Stories did have a shortcut that uploaded like all of the iPhone frames and then decoded those to wrap around your screenshots. And I have a feeling that just like 1,000 or like whatever 10,000 people downloaded that, and then all of the size of the shortcut itself is much larger than any other shortcut, which is only like a couple of megabytes. It would just mean that it's trying to store all these text strings that are just huge paragraphs of text, and ultimately shortcuts wasn't built for that level of thing because they just kind of assume it's just instructions on the actions. And so like I have 1,000 shortcuts, some of them with massive file sizes, all trying to go through the syncing process. And I just had a feeling that it did some madness on Apple's end and just like clogged the pipes. So specifically, since this person is trying to do a base 64 thing, my solution was to delete that shortcut and try something different, or don't store it in. It could depend on the way you store it. Like you could just store it in files and it could work almost as well. I also think I just want to like note this and say it for the shortcuts team at some point that I do think that they solved sync in one way while not actually solving the underlying thing, because for a while it just wouldn't sync the shortcuts order at all. And now I think it does sync the order, but sometimes the actions inside of it aren't staying synchronized across devices. So like he says, some of the shortcuts I already updated on the iPad were not visible on the iPhone. I don't know if that means that they didn't show up at all, but I had this where I changed something and then on my phone that hadn't synced back, whereas in the past it always did. Even though the shortcut and the order were correct, the actual shortcut itself wasn't correct. Which, just thinking of the technical issues with that, it's like not fun for them to solve. So they like technically have solved the order being that part, but the synchronization is not finished yet. And he's saying he unticked shortcuts in iCloud. You can untick sync, and like it's one of those things that I never know what actually worked, but turning off the iCloud sync, turning off all of your devices and the iCloud sync, and then turning like one back on and then turning on the sync to basically become that master, and then turning on the rest of them so they all match up is I think how I've done it in the past, but it's a little bit crazy making. So I'm not totally sure. I would say, as usual, feedback to Apple directly and providing as much detail is one of ultimately the only things people can do there. But hopefully, too, this has been synced in more recent versions and that this is old and no longer the case, but it very well could be. I do, unfortunately, not trust sync a whole lot because I've been bitten by it at least 5 or 8 times. So I hope that helps. I feel like I just bared my soul on that one.
It's very cathartic, right?
So this is another one from Forest Lake. That's the person's name in Australia. I have an automation to put my phone in low power mode when I connect to my Bluetooth headphones. The only problem, though, is I'm unable to work out how to set an automation to turn off low power mode when I disconnect my headphones. Any ideas to help out before his brain explodes? I think this is another one of those where, just to help out, you cannot have an automation trigger when a Bluetooth device disconnects. I don't know why specifically. It does kind of seem like one of those things that if your device just kind of lost connection and things like that, it's less of a signal than actively being connected. And also the Bluetooth automations themselves aren't the full run in the background automation. So this person is going to be triggering that every time anyways. I don't think there's a great solution, and we'll get to this in another one too, but there is kind of a thing with shortcuts where it's hard to restore a state that you were previously in if there was no like trigger for that specific state. If it was just kind of your default thing, like going back to low power mode off when you disconnect your headphones is like, there's no, besides the Bluetooth thing specifically just as a trigger, there's no other way for your phone to really know. You could have something like once an hour an automation checks and then turns it off if the Bluetooth stuff isn't connected, but even then that's not perfect. I do think this is one of those ones that there's just not really a good solution right now, so don't explode your brain on that one. Okay. I'm interested on this one too, Mikah, if you would ever use something like this, because I've built a similar process. So here, wait, this is longer. Okay, let me get it. So the person is asking about shortcuts and notifications, but they're not sure if it's technically possible. And again, this is one of those ones that's very close. And I've done something similar, but this person went down the same path as me and then got to the same issue. So there's they will forget to stand even after the Apple Watch reminds them. And they want to finish the task for a few minutes, and then you just don't see that notification. Is there a way to trigger a reminder notification just for a specific type of notification on an Apple Watch? So I think that's a very specific question, but I think I know what they're kind of looking for overall. They're looking into shortcuts to help remind them and determining how to trigger the shortcut in the first place. And then they're saying, I don't want a regular timer because most of the time I do stand and I'm trying to avoid a backup notification. And of course, if the notification goes away once I stand, I don't want the reminder to occur at all. Any suggestions would be appreciated. I imagine it could work for other things, but again, I think this is one of those, this is a fascinating problem. So I did the exact same thing where I was like, those stand reminders aren't perfect. Other people just don't even have Apple Watches. Why not just set reminders to go off every hour on the hour from now and for up to 8 hours or something like that? But then I was getting just notifications all the time to stand, even if I had
already stood.
So I
right.
do. Yeah, exactly. So there are technical ways to basically check the data and see whether or not you had stood, which I think would work really well. And then also there is the ability to edit reminders now in iOS 14.3, I think. But it's a little bit one of those ones where I probably will have to I'm going to build this for this person and get along there, because it is like the full level of this operating almost like an app the way the person wants might not be able to be fully feasible. But I do think you could basically just check in the health app whether or not you've stood. And then if not, it could edit the reminder to move it to the next hour. I do think the ultimate problem is that eventually you'd want to delete the reminder. And I think Shortcuts confirms when you delete. It might, I can't remember actually. I can't recall because I haven't tried it in a while, but the delete actions in Shortcuts sometimes have extra confirmation just to make sure you're not destroying your data without realizing it. But also, if there was just one reminder, you don't want to confirm the deletion and everything. Like, they really want this to be fully automatic. I do think the part about it, I guess that would account once they've stood, the reminder wouldn't occur. I think the ironic part is this could all happen, except that Shortcuts will send you a notification that the automation ran. So ultimately, it could work, but it also still might be notifying them. I think where they get their alerts, and you can set up the notifications to not show you on the watch, for example, would be a way to do it, or just deliver silently. But it is kind of funny. It's like you can have this whole fancy shortcut to get rid of those reminders and account for it, but it probably will need to be running. And then therefore you will have a notification from Shortcuts itself. And I think also it does kind of depend on time of day. So you might need multiple or one that's running regularly. So this is the type of realm where you're almost building your own app. And then at that point, the app could handle those kinds of logics, like an actual app would be able to handle that, where Shortcuts itself, I think because it's so eye trick or something and it happens, can't exactly do this right now. So that is a bit of a long-winded way to say you can get close. And I think there's ways that you can use this for I think reminders specifically and the Apple Watch, because there's something so close, might be too close to be worth it. But that ability to check for existing data and then adapt in real time as you're sending the notification, I think makes a lot of sense.
So I would use something like this. Yeah. I like this because to the person who wrote this in, I have that too, where, oh yes, I do understand. I just can't write in this moment. And I honestly, I don't know that it needs to be a shortcut. I hate to say it. I just think it needs to be an implementation that Apple needs to do, because that makes sense. If there's even just like a hold up button or hold on, remind me again in just a few seconds, something.
If you could just swipe on the notification and just do something like that, that would be nice.
Yeah, maybe I need to submit feedback or pay someone to submit feedback for me.
Forgot about that.
Oh yeah, maybe I should.
I'm checking now. I guess there isn't anything. Yeah, I agree. I think this is one of those situations where this person is like, shortcuts can extend the functionality of the operating system, but ultimately a discussion like this or somebody building that shortcut that is like kind of approving of the use case should be the thing that helps Apple realize this is what people want and you should implement it, which is nice, as opposed to, I feel like in the past it would just be like, can't do it. Oh, sorry, file feedback. It's like shortcuts kind of can be a proof of concept, which I think is nice because people want that stuff, and it's slightly esoteric, but I have the same problem. You have the same problem too. So maybe that can be education for Apple.
Yeah. All right. Up next, we have more feedback.
Cool. Now I have a question. This one also doesn't have a name, but this person made their own multi-stop trip planner for Apple Maps because Apple hasn't added it. So great example again of somebody building something on their own as a proof of concept, even though it does get pretty intense. They're saying, even though there's not a lot of traveling right now, it's still good for errands, but there are some use case edge bugs too as well that tends to happen. But we've got the shortcut. We can put it in the show notes too so people can click through it. But it's like a 130 action step process where you go through and plan out your trip. So it's pretty impressive. I do wish we're showing it on screen right now and there's no preview on the web or the steps of shortcuts. That's one of the reasons I made my own thing. But this is honestly pretty impressive. They've got a whole set of options for getting started, going on to the next leg and things like that, all within one shortcut, which is cool. So I love that kind of thing, that it's a sort of an app on its own too, and doesn't need, I probably would build multiple shortcuts for some parts of the process. So I've got to get more into some of these that are just a standalone tool, which is nice. All right. And then last shortcut one, this is kind of what I was referencing earlier. This is from Bob about after episode 63, I was starting to think about times and events that I would like to trigger watch face changes. What I can't figure out is how to tell shortcuts to revert back to the previous face. If my shortcut triggers, I can set a specific face for focusing, but at the next trigger, I want shortcuts to restore the previous face without specifying one or asking me each time. Any ideas? So this was great. And I was like, Bob, you nailed it, because this is exactly the thing that I was running into, of it's constantly moving my face along to the next stop, but going back to that default one isn't really there. And so I think with the same way where you would check for health data, I think the way that you would do it is when you write the shortcut. I mean, even then, maybe this is one of those things that I was looking through, but it always ends up having like one situation where it doesn't work, where I was going to say you should write the name of your default shortcut or your default watch face and then have it restore back to that. But I do think you'd run into situations where that wouldn't exactly work. I think this is one that I might need to put a call out for help from the development community. And I might actually ask our pal Rosemary Orchard, because she might be more in tune with how a developer would solve this kind of problem. But I think this is also a thing that Apple needs to make available for even in the get device details action. It should be able to tell you what the watch face is, because then you could save it and then operate off of that. So I think that's personally how I could see just a literal implementation that would fix this kind of problem. but also just being able to detect and save what the current audio output is another one for that Bluetooth problem. Those would be really nice. So I think these are things that need to get solved through Apple adding advances into their actions. Okay, I think that's good for shortcut stuff. We've got a couple HomeKit ones, but maybe we could save one or two for next time. Do you have any out of these that you were interested in?
Yeah, let's start with the first one.
Cool. So Brian Christensen has a issue with HomeKit, but it doesn't work away from the house. So he's got one of these fun situations. The Apple TV is the hub, but it's always showing on standby. Then when he adds his iPad, then the Apple TV becomes active and the iPad is standby, but it doesn't work. When he looks at his phone, it's constantly reconnecting to the hub, or it looks like it's reconnecting to the hub when both devices are set up as a hub. He's tried to remove it from HomeKit and run it just through the iPad alone, but then it's still only in standby mode. And so he's had this since iOS 13 and iOS 14, which is also like, oh my gosh, that's one of those things that's like you just give up on HomeKit by the end.
Yeah.
Do you have a solution? Because
so first of all, Brian, the first thing you need to be aware of is kind of don't take too much from the standby versus active mode. So I'm going to look at my iPad here. One sec. Got a Face ID it.
In the
Home
setting?
app, if you tap Home in the top left corner and choose Home Settings, then you can see, if you scroll down, Hubs and Bridges. When you tap on that, then it shows you multiple home hubs. And once again, my face is not in focus. Multiple home hubs. So on mine, these are all of the home hubs I have. Living room Toco, which is an Apple TV. Living room McClellan, which is a HomePod. Office Estivale, which is an Apple TV. Office Mini, which is a HomePod Mini. This iPad, which is literally the iPad right in front of me. And Vanderpool, which is an iPad Air. So what is that? 2, 4, 6 home hubs. And all of them, except for my living room Apple TV, are currently in standby. They all say standby except for the living room Apple TV, which says connected. So what does that mean? It means don't necessarily take standby versus connected into account whenever you're looking at this troubleshooting, because it is dependent on a whole bunch of things. It depends on which devices you're trying to connect or communicate with over HomeKit. It depends on who is in the house versus out of the house, which ones are closest to certain devices in order to do Bluetooth relay versus Wi-Fi, all sorts of stuff. And I can't speak to how quickly the statuses update. Is it statuses? How quickly the status update in relation to when these devices are or are not in standby. So let's just kick those things aside and talk about the issue that you're having here with not being able to control stuff while you're away from the house. So you have an Apple TV that is meant to work as a home and as a home hub, and you have an iPad that you are wanting to use as a home hub, but you said that you removed the Apple TV from HomeKit. I'm curious how you did that, when you did it, if you went to the Apple TV and made that adjustment, or if you did it from a different place, because depending on where you do it, it can have an outcome on whether that can kind of like reset the system. But yeah, this is an ongoing issue with a lot of folks where they have trouble due to some networking issue, being able to control the devices while they are away from their home. And there are a couple of troubleshooting steps that I suggest you take. One is to go into settings on the iPad as well as on your iPhone, and go to privacy, go to location services, and then scroll down and make sure that home has location access turned on. And here's what I would suggest you do actually is turn off access to location services, launch the home app, then come back to the settings, turn it back to while using the app or whatever the one is for you, and then go back and force quit the app and reopen it again. And do that on your iPad, do that on your iPhone. And I think that there's a privacy setting on the Apple TV as well. I'm not 100% on that though. But check that too to see if you can toggle that on and off, because there is a location step that takes place where it knows that you're away from the home, and therefore you need to connect to it over that access. So also make sure you don't have any, what's the word I'm looking for? Any special filtering or anything like that on your home network, on your router. So if you've got like MAC address filtering or things like that, that can kind of mess with things, especially while you're out of the home. So yeah, there's some different troubleshooting steps that you can do, but start with that location thing. If you truly did remove your Apple TV and re-add it already, then try the troubleshooting step of making location adjustments, and then go back into, like on my iPad here, where you launch the settings app, you scroll down until you see home, which is below shortcuts. And I choose use this iPad as a home hub. I toggle that off and then back on again. So try those things, Brian, and I hope that they work for you. If it still isn't working, let me know again, and I can kind of look into things further to see if there are any new troubleshooting steps that people have learned help them get connected. Because I had this briefly, and I ended up going all the way with it and just logging out of my Apple ID on all of my devices, which was not fun, and then logging back in again.
The other thing that might be, I can't remember, I thought I had the same problem, but in the home app, if you go into the little home icon and then the home settings, and you tap on each individual person, there is an option for control accessories remotely on or off. I would assume it's set on to you by default, but you could always toggle that. And then the other thing you could do is remove yourself, or I guess maybe not remove yourself. You can't do that, but you could remove another person if they were having an issue, or entirely set up the entire home again, which is not always fun. I think also, I thought at one point I had a problem with this, and then I realized that I didn't actually have the automation set up properly either. So I guess they're probably just trying to use Siri or something to trigger it outside of the house. But I just remembered that I was like running into it, and then I realized that I had one setting set actually to just be like me locally or something like that. And it was very silly because I was like, why isn't this broken? And it was like, no, just how I set it up. But it does sound like, especially the part where the main hub, even when they only have one hub, it's on standby, does sound like sort of a weird bug there. It might be at the home level, and sometimes resetting that up can be the ultimate solution. I hope not, though.
Yeah, exactly. What's next?
This one from Debbie Cantwell in Brighton was this is also a little bit for you. So I purchased an Eve Flare a couple of years ago when Megan showed it on iOS Today, and my son asked why it didn't change colors automatically. So I wrote a shortcut to allow it to cycle through 8 colors with a 30-second pause between each color. So it stays on the color for 30 seconds before changing to the next, and then it repeats 30 times. My problem is when I start the shortcut from my phone and go to do something else, my phone stops because the shortcut stops. Is there a way to keep the shortcut running during that time and still use my phone? And so I wrote in here home automation, because that is the way to keep shortcuts running continuously. I think the part that I wasn't totally sure about was whether or not, like, how to trigger this as opposed to a normal shortcut. So just on a technical level, home automations, if you go in below all the scenes and accessories, there's an option to convert to shortcut. And then you can have it basically just turns whatever step you were taking into a control home action. And then there's a limited set of shortcuts type actions that you can use in the home app, like if and repeat, so that you could do the same thing where you just set a number and repeat through those times 30 times for 30 seconds. There's a wait action too. And so technically there is the way to, I guess this could just be a scene, or no way. Now I'm trying to figure out.
No, because the scene doesn't let you use one device and have it do those multiple cycles. What I'm thinking you could set up is, so we would go into the home app, and then we would tap on the automations tab. We'd hit the plus and choose add automation. And then I would choose, and this is where it gets a little finicky, and where you might look to see if Eve has a tie-in with something like IFTTT or a different service. So this is one option, though, that I'm thinking about. New automation, choose when you want this automation to occur when a sensor detects something. Then you could set up something for, I think you said your son, where you've got a little motion sensor next to the Eve flare. And when your son waves his hand in front of the motion sensor, then it would do this thing. So I'll choose motion as the sensor. And so it says when this sensor detects motion or stops detecting motion, I'll choose detects motion and choose next. Then do this thing, and I will choose the right, a light, that doesn't matter for this. And then, and see, no, this won't work either. Because as an automation here, it's still, this is in the home app. Let me go to the shortcuts app and see.
I do think a smart button would be the best way to do it, because I didn't realize this. Smart buttons and their actions have that same convert to shortcut capability. We just discovered something new on the show, because I knew that you could even just have the button itself trigger an automation that does this based off of when a device is controlled, you press that button and it does that. But
it's
the button
not letting
itself,
me choose any of my buttons, though, in this. It's
probably because they're set up for Hue and not HomeKit. So you would have to sacrifice the Hue capabilities. And even like if you have the remote with multiple buttons, that's probably why. But like I have the single button thing here, and that inside the device options says the action as a single press can let you do devices, scenes, and the advanced convert to shortcut thing. So that's actually cool. I guess that makes sense. And I always
know if mine are working,
just thought it was.
I've got Hue ones, but I've also got ones that aren't Hue, and I'm not seeing it. It says programmable switches must be set up from the settings screen.
Yes. Are you in the automation option, or I'm on the button itself? I'm
not on the button. Yeah. I'm in the automations option, so you have to go to the button.
Yeah, and then you expand the tile. The actions single press has a convert to shortcut option there.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's in the home
still
app?
Could have worked. Yeah, it still could have worked as just an automation itself that's triggered by a button press, but the button itself has almost like automation convert to shortcut like capabilities that It's honestly like just very specific, but I am interested because it might make it just a little bit easier and like tied to the button, not just an automation. Very interesting.
All right, well, there you go.
Yeah, I'll have to try this actually with Logitech. I wonder if this makes flicks better.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to process this, but this is why feedback shows are awesome, because it totally is like, that might be a brand new feature that makes smart buttons a lot more useful, is they go beyond HomeKit into shortcuts and API type realms even easier than we thought they were. Nice.
Absolutely.
I think that's
all right.
Pretty much. Yeah, we can answer some more next time too.
Yep. Let us move on to our picks of the week. All right, Matthew Casanelli, what is your pick of the week.
And this is a kind of cool HomeKit product that I saw from Christopher Close covering on iMore, the HeimVision Smart Wake Up Light Review. And so this is one of those slow but steady wake up lights that brightens up as you get throughout the morning and things like that. And I will just say it has shortcut support. And oh, baby, that's how you get me to talk about a product. I will say in the review, he says this might be a downside because it doesn't have HomeKit support. But I still did think it was pretty interesting. And I want to know more about it specifically because there's like 20 buttons on it and a lot of different settings. And so I think it's one of those things that you would have to really play around with and understand what level of light do I want at what time and things like that. But I've been thinking about this more and more just because, I mean, I honestly don't use an alarm clock at all because I either just wake up too early or I'm just like doing my own thing. And so that's at least one of the nice parts, but it's still, I've been trying to wake up even like before the sun because it's not getting bright enough early enough. And I've just been waking up early now. So I do want to have a casual way to brighten it without having my phone or music or things like that wake me up. And this is pretty cheap too. It's $46 at Amazon, which is pretty solid. I do think it says in the review, he's like, trend with some of these cheaper smart home devices that are around lately is that it might be a little bit of a pain to set up and just kind of janky apps and things like that. But if the hardware itself does the trick and you can get some basic automations or maybe some shortcuts on the home screen for it, then it could be fun.
Neat.
Oh yeah, tell me about yours because I'm very interested in this.
Yeah, so I should be clear. I don't have this product yet. I just wanted to give it a shout out because it's, from what I've seen of it, it's going to be very cool. It's available for pre-order right now. So I've talked in the past about how much I love my CalDigit Thunderbolt. It's the TS3 Plus dock. And it is a Thunderbolt 3 dock that not only powers my MacBook Pro, but is the point of interface for all of my stuff, my audio interface, my monitors, everything. It's all plugged in to the TS3 Plus, and it's fantastic. And I think I've sold like 15 of them at this point because anytime someone who has a US or a Thunderbolt 3 MacBook Pro is looking for a dock, I'm like, you have got to get this one. And it's not because of any special, I bought this. It's not any special connection with the company. It's just genuinely that CalDigit not only makes a good looking product and a great working product, but it delivers on the promise that I had been promised for so long, which was one cord to plug into my MacBook Pro and everything else can connect to it from that cord. That's what Thunderbolt was supposed to do for me, and that's what this does. So there's my history with CalDigit. I already love their products. I've also got an SSD from them that's called the Tough Nano, which is great. But they just announced the Thunderbolt 4/USB 4, because they're almost the same thing at this point, Element Hub. So this is a Thunderbolt 4, but backward compatible with Thunderbolt 3 hub that has three Thunderbolt 4 ports, and then one on the side that is the actual Thunderbolt port for the host to connect to the computer and also power the computer, and then four USB 4 plugs.
Yeah,
so,
USB,
or excuse me, sorry. 4 USB-A plugs that do 10 gigabit per second transfer. And then the 4 Thunderbolt 4 ports are also USB 4 ports. It can power an 8K display or two 4K 60 hertz displays. You get 8 ports total. And so here's the deal. There's a great graph that we're currently scrolling on the screen that shows how the Element Hub compares to a USB-C hub that does 5 gigabits per second and 10 gigabits per second. This one does 40, and kind of what you get out of it, all the different things you can do. And all of that's great, but most people don't have Thunderbolt 4 devices right now. I certainly don't. The new MacBooks are the only product that I know of, because I'm not well versed in the PC space, are the only ones that have TB4/USB 4. Actually, I think they're just USB 4. I can't remember. Maybe they're TB4 USB 4. Anyway, they're the ones that are compatible with the Thunderbolt 4 technology. But here's where this gets awesome. And Kevin, if you can scroll, it's almost near the bottom. It's the part that shows it's black with white drawing, and it shows charging. It says centralize your charging to 1. So I've got my CalDigit Thunderbolt 3 dock, and that's great. But check this out. 8 devices charging on the CalDigit Element Hub here. You've got an Apple Watch, a pair of AirPods Pro, so an AirPods Pro case, an iPod, let's say an iPad Mini, an iPhone Mini, a standard sized iPhone. There's a MagSafe charger that you can put an iPhone on, and then another iPhone plugged in. That's 6. Then 7 is the AirPods Max, which is 15 watts, and then an iPad plugged into the side of it for up to 60 watts is number 8. So charging 8 devices at once, and that replaces it shows there. I didn't see that at the bottom. The number, it tells what all of them are. It replaces 4 5-watt chargers, 3 18-watt chargers, and a 60-watt charger. It does all of that in one little hub. So even if you don't have a Thunderbolt 4 device, just a place to charge a fantastic way to have a charging hub that's going to charge all of your devices at once. I think this is great for that. And then also, this is something that I didn't know, but apparently the Apple SuperDrive, for those of you who are still using DVDs and CDs for whatever reason, it needs a lot of power. And I had no idea. It doesn't work like a standard external disk drive. And so CalDigit points out that most of the hubs that you have can't put enough power into the Apple SuperDrive. So they have a special driver that recognizes the Apple SuperDrive and lets the Apple SuperDrive get the proper amount of power that it needs. That is what I love about CalDigit, is that it's it's sophisticated, and it takes the technology and does it right. I don't know how else to put it except that it does it right. It figures it out and makes sure that it's truly compatible, and it does it in this really nice package that I don't have to fiddle about with things. I don't have to, futz about. It just all works. They show with the Element Hub on an Intel Mac, so like one that I have, the Thunderbolt 3 Mac, it will power 4K 30 hertz display, 4K 60 hertz display, the 5K 60 hertz Thunderbolt display, the 6K 60 hertz Apple Pro display XDR, the 8K 30 hertz display, and then 2 4K 60 hertz displays on Intel Macs and on Thunderbolt 4 devices. So I think really incredible that they've been able to pack into this device for sure.
It's like its own computer. And I didn't even see it can daisy chain with their other TS3 Plus. It has more of the display ports and Ethernet and audio and SD card things, so you could just still have that one cable go into that and then back out to your computer. That's awesome. I really got to see if it can handle video, because that's the ultimate thing for me. And it does sound like, of all things that I've seen, this would be the one, particularly because it is just a little computer there and can handle that amount of power. I think is probably part of it as well. So that's very interesting, especially both those together. That could be like the ultimate peripheral solution for Apple users specifically. So that is very compelling, interesting. And like 4K 60 hertz from iPad. I think that's a big thing that a lot of docks came out in the last 2 years for iPad Pro to connect to a computer screen, but it doesn't do it at the highest refresh rate. And so this is all very interesting. I want to go to there.
Yes. And so if you want to go to there, you can pre-order it. The pre-order price is less expensive than the eventual price. So available for $140 as the pre-order, which is, if you've looked at Thunderbolt docks, that is an incredible price at $140. That is a very impressive price. And then it will eventually be available for $180. So yeah. That, folks, is the CalDigit Thunderbolt 4 Element Hub. And I think it's very cool. Very cool. And I might, like I said, I might be getting one just to have as a way to charge my devices. And then, as you pointed out, the fact that it can be daisy chained to the Thunderbolt 3 hub that I have here sitting on my desk and power a bunch of USB devices. Hallelujah. The sound of the angels. Well, folks, that brings us to the end of another episode of A Smart Tech Today. If you have questions, you can send those to stt@twit.tv, or if we ask you for some follow-up, then also send that there, stt@twit.tv. If you're watching live, we appreciate it. If you'd like to join the folks watching live, you can do that by hanging out with us every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 1:30 p.m. Pacific, which is 21:30 UTC, by going to twit.tv/live. But the best way to get the show, to enjoy the show, to love the show, is by subscribing. And you do that by going to twit.tv/STT, where you can subscribe to the show in audio and video formats across just every platform. Where you are is where we want to be, and where we often are as well. So you can check us out in all of those places and subscribe to the show. And remember, don't forget to rate and review on Apple Podcasts. We would appreciate it. Matthew Casanelli, if folks want to check out your work, where do they go to do that?
I'm going to ask for a very specific thing this time, because this has been amazing. I'll put in the links in the show notes of this episode an Airtable link to a survey that I'm running, where I'm asking people, what do they know about shortcuts? What's your familiarity level? A bunch of different questions. What's your job and things like that. And it's been amazing getting answers so far. This is going to help me so much teach everybody what to focus on with shortcuts and in what order too specifically. So look for the link. Please go fill that out. And it is it's going to benefit everybody. And I'm so pumped that I've gotten like 300 replies so far, which has been very cool. So check out the description of the podcast for that link. What about you?
You can find me on chihuahua.coffee, CHIHUAHUA.coffee, where there are links to all the different places I exist online. I'm at Mikah Sargent on as many social networks as I could possibly be, including, I think, Clubhouse. Do they have usernames on there? I don't remember. Anyway, that's where I am. Folks, it is time to say good afternoon to all of your smart assistants.
Have a good rest of your week.
Hey, folks, I'm Ant Pruitt, host of Hands of Photography here on Twit TV. I know some of you have gotten yourself a brand new camera, or you just had a camera sitting around and can't quite figure out how to get the most out of it. Well, I have a solution. My show, Hands on Photography. So subscribe right now to learn how to get the most out of that camera. I'm going to show you how to make those images pop. I don't care if it's a Canon camera. I don't care if it's a Sony, Nikon, iPhone, Android, even an inexpensive Android device. I got you covered. So head on over to twit.tv/hop and subscribe today.